and welcome back to Aasai Rasai. I'm making cookies today. I've been working on this recipe for quite some time because I needed to find the balance of how much dairy milk I need for the cookies. Yes, I said dairy milk because I don't always have coconut milk, and when I need to make something I always find out that I have run out of ingredients. So here I am. I've found exactly what works for this recipe if you're using dairy milk to make cookies. So in the bowl I'm whisking the rice flour, the turmeric, the salt and the milk. During my trial and error period, I tried the recipe with different milk temperatures, and what works best is if the milk is slightly warmed to room temperature. I'm using low-fat milk because that's what I have at home, and I warmed it up in the microwave for about 20 or 30 seconds because chilled milk doesn't work really well for this recipe. Now, the consistency of the batter is really important. After mixing, you should be able to get it to look like this. It should flow in a single stream continuously without breaking. When it drips down into the bowl, you see it doesn't make ribbons, so it's not as thick that it would drip down and make ribbons in the batter, but the flow is continuous. It's not drippy or anything. And this is the type of cookies you will get with this batter. It's crisp. It's just like the traditional cookies. You wouldn't even know that it has dairy milk. And this is just something that I wanted to show you before we get started. Now this is the mold that I'm using. The Sri Lankan Kokis mold has a little pivoting head to it, but this one doesn't. This is the Swedish rosette set, and I have the option of making two different patterns of cookies if I use it, or I can just use one. So I'm going to use it only one because I'm not very skilled at making cookies to the point that I could use two at the same time. And when you're dipping the mold in the batter, you shouldn't go beyond the halfway mark because that's going to be hard to take the cookies out if you go all the way to the edge. Another thing you'll need is a skewer, or a knife would do, a small knife, and that's going to help to loosen out the cookies. Before you make each cookies, stir the batter really well because it tends to separate. The flour tends to settle and the liquid will come to the top otherwise. And I have a bowl with me that's waiting for the cookies. Once it's made, you just put in the bowl. And you have to have all these things prepared because you're working with hot oil. I have turned the heat on to medium, and the oil is starting to warm up, and until then I just want to explain about the cast iron pan that I'm using. If you're using a heavy pan like this and it's cast iron, just pay attention to the temperature because it really holds the heat for a long time. Eventually you might have to, or you will have to, turn the heat all the way to low because the oil becomes so hot. When you start to make the cookies with a new mold, expect the cookies to stick at least a few times at first. And then after that, after a few times, it doesn't stick anymore. It's much easier to take out of the mold. I just reduced the temperature a little because I think the oil is getting a bit too hot. So keep an eye out and pay attention to the oil temperature. It's very important. The mold has to be held in the oil before it's dipped into the batter, and this has to be done each time you make a new cookies. And don't put the mold all the way down into the pan that it touches the base of the pan, because if you do that and you dip it into the batter, then the batter is not going to stick to the mold. It's just going to slide off, or it'll stick too much that it will just get burnt. So the temperature of the mold has to be evenly distributed as well. Another thing to remember is when you first dip the mold into the oil, before you even make the first cookies, the mold takes about 20 seconds to heat up. And after that, after making the first few, you'd probably have to warm up the mold in the oil only for about 10 seconds. When the cookies is firm enough that you could move it with the skewer, flip it over to the other side. Right now it's still firming up. So just move it around in the oil. It can be even colored and even yellow. It really doesn't take that long to fry, but for me, I wanted to get different shades of yellow and golden shades. So there's like variety in my platter of cookies, but sometimes people like it more uniform colored, and it's just a personal preference. So now this one's done. If you want it a very subtle yellow, as soon as it firms up, take it out of the oil, because while it's cooling, it's going to fry further and be a shade darker. So here I go again. This time I'm going to keep the mold for about 10 seconds in the oil, because it has been in the oil the last few minutes. I'm trying to adjust the camera so that I can show you a close-up of how far the mold goes into the batter. And then gently place it in the oil. At this point, what I should have done was reduce the oil temperature a little, because as you can see, the cookies is frying a little too fast and adhering to the mold. I'm having a little trouble taking it off the mold. It's not coming out like the first time. And I'm going through the edges, the corners of the mold like that, where it really sticks. So if you have this struggle too, just hold the cookies out of the oil, just above the oil, and try to remove it. If it's too soft, don't force it. Dip it back in the oil, that part of the cookies mold, dip it into the oil for a few seconds, and then when it firms up, you could just push it out. So like that. I'm just trying to hope that this will work and save my cookies. Now you see how important it is to have control of the oil temperature. This comes with experience. You cannot really explain exactly what temperature it should be at what point. And you see the state of my mold now, but it doesn't matter. We can continue making it without cleaning the mold at this point, because once I dip this into the hot oil, all those pieces are gonna crust up and it'll be okay. Now I have been making cookies for a few minutes now, because you can see I have a bowl of them and my batter has reduced. At this point my pan is very hot and the oil is super hot. The heat is being maintained by the pan because it's a very heavy pan. I reduced the temperature of my stove to the lowest setting, and I let the oil cool down a little bit so that I could bring down the temperature and the cookies doesn't burn. I'm ready to start again at a lower temperature oil now. And when I put the cookies back in the oil, just watch how it sizzles. Pay attention to the bubbling. As you see, it didn't start bubbling as soon as it hit the oil. It was very gradual, and this is what you should aim for, because that gives the batter some time to really form and crisp up and loosen out of the mold. So you're not rushing anything here. This is why it takes a lot of focus and attention to make cookies. See how easily it comes off the mold now? Very gently loosen up. If you're making cookies for the first time, I would say try to get a mold that's very straightforward, that doesn't have too many curves or edges, because it can frustrate you if the cookie sticks to the mold and you have to spend a lot of time trying to take it out. I'm just almost there, and just you can see I'm holding it above the oil from time to time. That's so that it doesn't brown too much and I can buy some time. Now you're probably wondering if an egg would help if I mix the egg in the batter. Wouldn't it help the cookies to come off the mold easily, because that's what usually happens, right? No, it didn't. I tried it with the egg as well, and the cookies just became very soggy like pancakes. I had to make this work without the egg. It had to come off the mold, it had to fry, it had to be the same crispiness like the traditional cookies, and it shouldn't taste like anything other than the traditional cookies. So everything worked out perfectly. Also a reminder, after a few minutes of frying, go into the pan and check and take out any burnt residue, so that your cookies won't have flecks of burnt batter that's stuck to it. Another important tip is to rest the batter for about 30 minutes to 1 hour. If you can rest it for about 1 hour, it's much better. This gives the flour time to absorb moisture and the batter becomes much easier to work with. After making cookies for a few minutes, you will know how to control the oil temperature, and you'll get a feel of when it's too hot and when to reduce, when to increase the heat again, all that. You'll be able to make several cookies at a time, and then things will start to move a little faster. You'll have more confidence than when you first began making it. So this is all about skill and experience. Anything that looks easy may not be easy to do, and unless you try and unless you practice, you will never get that skill. So try it out with a little bit of flour, like about 2 ounces or 3 ounces. Make a few cookies at a time. See how you feel about it. See if the batter consistency is right. If the batter is too thin and it's not flowing in a continuous stream, that means you need to put a little more flour. So play around, adjust, make a little at a time so there's no waste, and see what works for you. In no time at all, you'll be making excellent cookies. At this point, I'm almost through with the batter. The oil also has reduced, so I'm not going to add any more oil and continue to cook. Once the mold doesn't reach the batter, or the batter is not deep enough for the mold to reach and immerse, I stop making it. But of course, if you're going to continue to fry anymore, you'll have to add more oil and then follow the same heating procedures. And those are done now. If it's soft like that, just let it fry a little longer. And I also wanted to mention that the rice flour that I used was the regular store-bought rice flour. It's just a packet that says rice flour. It's not roasted rice flour, unroasted rice flour. It's not rice flour that's made at home, that's damp, all those things. No, it's just the regular store-bought rice flour. I have kept this recipe really simple and straightforward, that you would probably have these ingredients at home right now. Just the milk, the rice flour, and turmeric and salt. That's it. And you can even flavor the cookies. You could add spices into it, herbs into it. You could add sugar. You could dip the cookies in a thick crystallized sugar syrup and they dry hard. So give this recipe a try and check out all my other videos on this channel, Aasai Rasai. Thanks for watching. I'll be back with another video soon.